I was part of a nightlife where I was accepted, never paid for a drink. I could have as much booze as I wanted wherever I went. I could score cocaine and never pay for it. I felt like a queen, as though people wanted me around, and that was something I've never felt. When I was alone in Paris in the apartment, I wrote a suicide note. I cut my wrists. I got a bad infection in them. To be honest, towards the end when I was shooting up gear, I didn't care if I made it or not out of it. The only way I can make restitution is to be the mother that I am meant to be. I have a framework. I practice principles. I am the mum that shows up.
Hello and welcome to 12 Steps and 12 Questions. My name is Silvio and I'm an addict. This pod is full of personal and inspirational stories of recovery from addiction. And in every episode I'll ask each guest the same 12 questions about their life, addiction and recovery. Quick warning, there will be some graphic descriptions and a healthy amount of swearing. For this episode, please welcome Lise.
Hi Lisa, thank you so much for being here and being my guest on this new edition of 12 Steps and 12 Questions. Would you like to introduce yourself quickly, please?
Hello, Silvio. Thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Lisa, and I am a spiritual being having a human experience. I'm truly grateful to be sober today for 18 years.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. So the first of our 12 questions is, did you have any adverse childhood experiences?
That's a really good question. I think I've had many adverse childhood experiences, but the one that really comes to mind that changed the dynamics of my family was when, I was about 5 years old, and prior to that, I was this child that loved my favourite Hungarian dress and did cartwheels and wore string in my hair thinking I had long hair and, felt free, felt loved. But I was about 5 years old and, this woman was on our lawn completely naked. And my mother, I was looking out the window, and my mother ran out with her coat and brought her in. And what had transpired was that the husband of this lady had kicked her out of the car onto my parents' lawn because he found out she was having an affair with my dad. And everything changed. Everything changed from then. Yes. My mother, she's Danish. She had 3 children, all under the age of 5, and she was about, 29 years old. And her family's in Denmark, and my father is a Royal Marine. And it was really the start of a real breakdown in my family in terms that my dad had multiple affairs. And as I grew older, I began to see more of this pattern, and he would spend less time at home, and my mother just became really nasty.
Yeah.
I was scared of her, proper scared. I was scared of my mum right up until I came into recovery, and I was in my mid-40s. So I spent my whole life frightened of her, always seeking her approval. I just wanted her, when I hit some really, really difficult times in my life, I was just wanting her to put her arms around me and just say, what, Lisa, it's all going to be okay. I'm here for you. And I just never got that,
No.
And it's only coming into recovery I understand that, she was actually dealing with a breakdown, a breakdown in her marriage. And I've worked towards, some form of forgiveness around that.
Yeah.
Around both my parents.
It must have been quite a traumatic and also slightly odd experience, especially for a child. For anyone, I suppose, but especially for a child, something like that, where someone turns up on your doorstep naked.
Yeah.
Hard to imagine what happened behind those scenes there, that this person would send out his wife naked like this into someone's garden. This is the trauma behind that must have been also just crazy. But it set a pattern, I suppose, in terms of your mother and your relationship then later on towards each
definitely.
other. Mm.
I mean, it set a pattern between both my parents and myself. I'm a middle child, so I have an elder brother and a younger sister. And my younger sister was always spoilt.
Yes.
And my brother was treated as the eldest, and all the efforts of his achievements and possible achievements were really laid on. And I was just like the middle child syndrome, the weird one in the middle. And I was pretty weird. I was really locked in to my own world,
Did you feel you had to be locked in maybe into a degree because you weren't really getting any attention from either side?
I've been brought up to keep secrets. You don't tell anybody anything, you don't talk about that. So all my life I've been able to, I've always indulged in really risky behaviour, and I've always kept it a secret. Like, most people don't really know who I am,
No. Interesting stuff. And secrets keep you sick, as they say. So this happened when you were really, really young. I mean, 5 is, incredibly young age. If we fast forwarded maybe a few years, you said there's a pattern there that evolved. How did that evolve? In what way? That pattern between you and your parents and those difficulties?
Well, I mean, it's complex because, as we were growing up, my mother, she's Danish, so there was so much racism, we were picked on so much, kids would come around the front of our house and shout out names to us, call us names. Going to school, I used to get punched, kicked all the time, walking past certain kids. It was I just used to hate it. And my dad was just never there, I mean, ever since that incident, my dad was less and less at home for about 10 years,
Wow.
Yeah. And then he was permanently back in the room, so to speak. But the funny thing is, I so wanted to be his favourite. I really wanted him to like me, And there was a time I thought, I was quite special, and that he treated me differently to my siblings,
So do you think there may have been a special relationship about to evolve but then didn't?
It did. I mean, he's a really funny guy. I found so much porn in the house. I mean, so much porn. And I mean, my dad was just a womanizer, really. He couldn't help himself. And when I was 26 and I came home with my first child, who was 6 months old, I was in the kitchen with my mother. She was washing up and I was drying. And my dad came in and he molested me in front of her. He behaved in such an extraordinary manner. I just looked at my mum in shock, and he just left the room and we never spoke about it. And I spoke about it for the first time a couple of years ago. I went to see my mum purposely and said, "Do you remember that incident? Did you speak to him about it?" And she said, "No, Lisa, you have to remember that I have only started to sleep in the middle of the bed because the whole of my life I have slept on the edge to get away from his advances."
Wow.
And that was that. And I remember I spoke to my sponsor and told him, because he knew I was going to go and speak to her about it. And he says, "That just doesn't surprise me, the answer, because it's totally deflecting, And that really sums up your relationship for all those years, you know?
Wow. So our second question is, what did the moment you first got hooked, what did the fun times look like? So you coming from this background where there's trauma in your birth family, there's conflict in your birth family, you're feeling left out, and somewhat marginalized perhaps. And at some point, of course, alcohol and or drugs are introduced into this mix. So, and usually that's a good time to begin with. So what did the fun times look like? The good times, the times when you got hooked?
You know, I started drinking secretively when I was about 9. And when I went to art school, I felt I can really let go now, and I can drink as much as I want, and I don't care, okay? And it was never with people. It's always on my own. You know, I score speed, take it on my own, you know, in my room. And it wasn't really fun, but when I was having fun and it really kicked in was when I moved to Paris. And, you know, I was part of a nightlife where I was accepted, you know, never paid for a drink. I could have as much drink, booze as I wanted wherever I went. I could score cocaine and never pay for it. And I remember I was introduced to a dude who was serving up cocaine. And I went to his place and he would serve cocaine in a soup spoon. It was just like a huge mountain, and plonk it on the table. And he would then put a part of it onto this massive lens, this camera lens, and offer big lines of cocaine. And I remember thinking, man, this is just, you know, this is the life. I love this life. I'm doing exactly what I want to do, how I want to do it, you know. And I could still get up in the morning, you know, as a creator and designer. I could still get up, I could work, and I could party, and it was the best times, you know. I was meeting amazing people, hanging out. I was photographed. I was the muse to Jean-Claude Legres, and I could go anywhere. I felt like a queen, you know. I felt I had arrived in this place, you know. I felt as though people wanted me around, and that was something I've never felt.
Yeah.
You know?
Now, in that, it's really interesting because on the one hand, we spoke earlier just now about the fact that you were, I'd say, self-medicating pretty early on, right? So you said you did speed in your room, which is doesn't sound like a lot of fun, to be fair, you know, and so on. So there was quite a lot of self-medicating first before you actually then went out and you had a great time because you were in an environment that cherished you.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. No, I agree. I think, you know, those formative years, I don't really like to use the word damage, but I felt very undeveloped, very immature. I was chasing things, but I didn't know how to chase it. And at the same time, I was secluding myself because I didn't want to take risks. And then I'll take other kinds of risks and be really secretive about it. You know, I was just this complicated child that probably no one wanted to really have anything to do with me. I was a real loner, a proper loner, you know.
When you say you took risks, what do you mean by that?
Drinking, smoking cigars. Like I would steal my dad's cigars, smoke them. I was like 11 years old. It would make me so ill. Drinking a lot from the cabinet and just going upstairs and passing out and hoping that my parents didn't notice, you know. I would lie. Like I would go into school with a really old birthday card And I'll say it was my birthday and that I've just received this card just to show that, someone knows me. Look, I'm really popular. Just, and though the idea of being found out would mortify me, because I would create stories. Like in secondary school, I told this girl that my dad's a Royal Marine and he was out on a boat and he was swallowed by a whale and he was able to free himself. It was like the most incredible story. Oh dear, just lying to create some sort of an interesting persona.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I find this fascinating. I think we all lie a little bit when we're at a certain ages. When you're in school, there's a lot of hyperbole and whatnot going around. But to make yourself into almost a different person than you really are, I think is really interesting. Did you, a little bit later on when you were not 9 or 10, but did you have, or maybe even then, did you have any awareness that what you were doing was a bit weird, as you said, that your behavior was maybe not run of the mill? Did you have any idea that this was happening?
Not really.
Right. That was your normal.
Yeah.
So going back to the drinking and the drugs, so especially if we're looking at a time where you were self-medicating, but maybe also a little bit further on where you were living the high life in Paris, which I've often talked about on here. I've also been privileged to have enjoyed, and it was great at the time. What did the drugs do for you feel that you could not do for yourself, and the drink?
It made me popular, and I love doing it. I can't lie.
Yeah.
I love doing cocaine. I love drinking. The only problem is I don't know how to stop that. I remember being out with Jerome, who was the coke dealer, and he thought I was fabulous. He really loved to go out with me and hang out with me, and I look back at that girl I was, I didn't think I was fabulous at all. But anyway, we were out and he always took cocaine with him, and he had it in a special pen, and he clicked the top of the pen and a little scoop comes out with coke in. It's a really clever device. And he was just clicking this pen out, sniffing coke. And I remember he said to me, you need to stop now. I mean, I don't know what was happening, if I was about to have a seizure or something, but he just says, you need to stop now. And I'm like, no, I'm good, and just carried on drinking. Just didn't know when to stop. I mean, I'm quite a petite person, and back in those days, I was really tiny, really, really slim. I don't know how I consumed the amount I did, insatiable appetite, and drinking, I would just drink and drink till I dropped. I don't know how I would get into that taxi to get home. I don't know how I got into that bed, but there's one thing I do know. I always got home. Always got home, And you
just reminded me of a few bits and pieces that I've really not wanted to think about for a while, I guess, because I haven't thought about them. But I remember there were times where, even in the good times, where people said to me, they said, there's something wrong with you. You need to stop now. Or you have taken so much. I'm worried about you. It's like, what are you on about? Give over. I'm having it's a great time. But it's interesting, if you start worrying the people around you that you're doing an enormous amount. I mean, if your coke dealer worries about you, you've got a problem. Yeah. So that brings us over to question 3, which is, I'm quite aware that that's quite a big time span that we cover with it. But still, question 3 is, what were your worst consequences? And then finally, your rock bottom, if you had one. So you had a great time. You're in Paris. you're coming from this background, but you're having the time of your life. How did that progress? How did your illness progress?
I met someone. That's all it took, you know. I met someone, and he introduced me to heroin, and it was just game over, you know. It wasn't like, you know, oh, I took heroin and I was taking it every day. I took heroin once, and then I moved in 2 months later, and I didn't love this guy, but I just didn't have the money for my apartment anymore. He had Nutella and Orangina in the fridge. I had nothing in mine. He had a phone line that worked. I didn't have a phone anymore. And he would leave some coins on the table for me for each day. I had no money. And when I say no money, I had 0 pence, no bank account, no money.
It's flooded.
Yeah, the 2 options. I either go back to London to my parents, or I move in with this dude, you know? So I moved in with him, and it just declined the minute I walked through that door. It became so dark, you know? I was pregnant virtually immediately.
Wow.
He and I took heroin together, but he was a dealer of ecstasy and hashish. So the apartment was like an airport lounge every day. In and out, people, in and out, in and out, in and out, you know, all hours. I hated it, but I couldn't leave.
Why not?
Couldn't. Had no power to leave, you know? I think there was a part of me that thought to myself, it will all work out. But I was kind of living a life that was just for today. It was just, there was no future and there was no past. It was just the here and now, you know? I was living each moment, and each moment was in that flat. Yeah.
So you moved in with this dealer, you get pregnant, and there's people coming in, day out, all the time. Must have been a living hell.
Yeah. And they were like, this one dude was shooting up gear in the bathroom, and when he would leave, there would be like blood up the walls. And I remember saying to Pascal, you know, this is really shit. You know, this is just a really rubbish life. But he had no power, and I didn't have any power. It's just like, just give me a line. We were sniffing heroin then, you know. And you asked me about a rock bottom. You know, I eventually came back to London mid-90s because he left me. He just said one evening, I haven't been loyal. I've been seeing someone else for some time, and I'm leaving. Wow. Just like that. And I have a 2-year-old child. I felt I could never leave. Even when I wanted to, I couldn't. I hated living the life with him and my circumstances, and he just announced that. I was just so unprepared for that. And he took a bag, and we lived on the 5th floor, right on the boulevard, and he took a bag of some clothes and he went downstairs. And as he left the front of the building, I was looking out down at him, and there's these old Parisian apartments that have really long windows, and halfway up is like a wrought iron guard. And I was leaning over this guard, and I just wanted to just drop out the window. Yeah. You know, I've got this child crawling around the floor. I just wanted to drop out of the window. And I just couldn't handle it. I could not handle it. I cut my wrists. I was sniffing so much heroin. I was going back to get cocaine. I was doing both. I was smoking weed. you name it, whatever I could get my hands on, I was doing it daily. And I remember waking up one morning and I looked in the mirror and I had no butt cheeks left. I had no bum, and I had the shakes like proper. I knew I was bang in trouble. But the thing is, I knew I was bang in trouble when I was pregnant, sniffing heroin. I was bang in trouble. I remember there was a group of people round, and Pascal had put lines of gear on the table, and I had like a huge belly. I was about 7 months pregnant. And I took this line of heroin, and this girl sitting in front of me just looked at me with the most disgust on her face. Yeah. And I remember it today. And now I would be like, man, I feel your pain, because this girl doesn't know what she's doing, you know? Mm. But at the time, I was like, what are you fucking looking at? You know, you judging me. You got something to say to me. Yeah. You know, I would fight. I had no love. I had no awareness. I had no care, you know.
How long did you spend in that state that you're talking about there?
Right through the pregnancy, right through, you know, the 2 years till the day he walked out, you know.
That's a long time.
Oh, yes. And, you know, I was so angry, Sylvius. I was so angry at my circumstances. I didn't choose this. I was the girl that everybody wanted to hang out with, okay? I was running around Paris with dreams and aspirations. I was a cool kid, you know? And now I'm in this flat, I've got a baby, I'm taking drugs, the dude's leaving me. I just didn't sign up for this. Yeah. And there was nothing I could do about it except I was going to use. And I remember, you know, calling someone, and I just said, I haven't got the energy to go out and score. Can you pick up and bring it over? And when she came over, she looked at me, she goes, you look like you're in bad shape, you know. I was in proper bad shape.
And how did it progress from there? Because it took another while for you to find the rooms.
Oh yeah, it got so bad because I moved back to London and I just carried on using. I thought the problem would stay in Paris. Yes. I was really naive. I was just a kid. I was 29 years old, you know. I was just a kid. And I came back to London. I was headhunted for a brilliant job, you know, down in Surrey Institute of Arts as a accessory lecturer. Scored this job, and I was scored gear on my way and gear on the way back. And
did you stay on heroin or did you move?
Oh yes, I was on heroin. And I remember the dean asked me to come into her office, and she sat me down. She goes, Lisa, what's really going on? I said, I don't know, nothing's going on. Everything's good. You know, and inside I wanted to say, my life's a mess. Can you help me? I couldn't, you know. And, you know, you talk about rock bottom. I think that it's like a series of events that take place. And I don't know if I've even reached my rock bottom, because I think ultimately it's, you know, when you die, you know. But my using had gone into injecting, and the risks I was taking with that, you know, scoring off dudes in King's Cross, Cole Harbour Lane, Clapham Common, Streatham, Brixton, you know, I know all those areas, all the estates, Stockwell, you know, the big estate outside Stockwell Tube, all these places I'll score with my son, you know, get beat up, score with fake money, done all of that stuff.
How long did that all go on for until you didn't find the rooms, do you think?
I was just in my 30s, you know. Yeah. But what happened was I eventually went into a rehab for women with children that didn't want to be living in the rehab. So I was basically a day patient. So I could keep my responsibilities as a mother. And I got onto a methadone script. And that saved my life at the time, you know.
Wow.
It really saved my life because the life was so dangerous. I mean, I was getting into cars with yardies, ending up in estates, disused estates, all for a bag of brown, you know. Just really risky behaviour.
Very dangerous.
Very dangerous. So, yeah, the methadone script, and it gave me a structure. I'd go every day to the pharmacy to pick that up. I had therapy every day, and it gave me a lifeline.
Yes.
You know, before I actually got that methadone script, I woke up one morning and I knew I couldn't go out and score. Couldn't stand up. And I called my mum and I said, you need to get me to hospital. I'm in a really bad way. And she came to the house. And when she came, I crawled from my house, on my hands and knees, in my night clothes. And I had gravel on my drive, crawled on the gravel, and she just pushed the door open. I crawled in, and she said, what is wrong with you? And I just told her straight. I said, I'm a heroin addict, and I have been for years. Just get me to hospital. Yeah. And I was in hospital for 8 days. And I said to my mum, don't tell them what's really wrong, because they won't admit me. I was that scared. You know, I said, just don't tell them. And my mum got a wheelchair and took me in and just said to them, my daughter needs help. You need to look after her.
Now, question 4, you sort of touched on it a little bit there earlier, is did you ever want to die? Did you consider suicide at your worst?
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. Right up until I came into recovery. Yeah, many times. I mean, when I was alone in Paris in the apartment, I wrote a suicide note. I cut my wrists. I got a bad infection in them, which needed a doctor to look after me for that. But yeah, many times. And to be honest, towards the end when I was shooting up gear, I didn't care if I made it or not out of it.
Yeah. You knew you could go over, but you didn't care.
I didn't care.
Yeah. Yeah. I do this every time and I'm not going to stop. If you're listening to this out there and you're having similar thoughts or you're in a similar place, speak up, look for help. There are places that you can go to. I will put some in the show notes. Just speak up pretty much to anyone. You don't have to be in that place. You can call the Samaritans, you can call 999. There are things that you can do, right? And do them now, please. And it's super important to keep that in mind. We touch on this in almost every podcast because it's part of our story and that's where addiction takes you. And it is a fatal disease and it can be a fatal disease, so it has to be talked about. But we also need to make sure to put out the message that there is help available, you know. Our question 5 is, what other methods, if any, did you try to get sober before finding the rooms?
If you're enjoying this podcast and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe.
Yeah, therapy. Love therapy. I've just completed a 12-week course actually at the beginning of this year, grief therapy. My father passed last year. But yes, therapy, yoga, Tai Chi, Reiki, acupuncture, counseling, and various detox methods. Tried loads of things. And a lot of those things I still use today, like yoga, Tai Chi. I do a morning salutation every day.
But in and of themselves, I'm guessing they didn't keep you sober.
No, but they for me, they create an avenue that I can go back to, because, listen, I call myself a spiritual being having a human experience. I really believe that, everybody comes from a place that is, a spiritual place that is very difficult to describe how it happens. I'm fortunate to have 3 sons, and, that whole process of having a child, what happens, how a child grows in the womb, to giving birth and nurturing, it is just something so incredibly amazing and so difficult to even break down and explain. It has to be something spiritual. And then what happens to that spiritual being is that they start living, a life, a human life.
Yeah.
And, all that pathway of yoga and Tai Chi, and that helps me get back in touch to a place where I feel really silent and quiet, a nurturing place, a place that doesn't judge me, a place that I feel safe, Yeah.
And it sort of touches to a degree on to our next question, which is question 6, which is, when you came into the rooms, did you struggle with the word God?
No, not really. When I came into the rooms, I was so ready to find this new way of life. And my sponsor, right from the get-go, never pushed that conception on me. He said, you find your own, He never pushed me into getting on my knees to pray, to address my higher power as God. He just gave me a clean slate and said, I am showing you the way through the steps, and you find what works for you and apply it to your life. This is your life, this is your framework that you're making for you to be able to live a life free from drugs. And it's about emotional sobriety, how to handle how I feel and what I think, that is only for me to do. No one can give that to me.
No.
I have to find it.
Yeah. But you didn't struggle because,
No, I didn't, because I'd reached a place. Listen, Silvio, I had been in so many places that of absolute sheer loneliness and darkness. Yeah. I choose life. So I have to find the way that works for me, and whatever that takes,
Yeah. Our question 7 is, how do you experience your higher power today? Or maybe you want to share some God moments.
Yeah, power greater than myself. Step 2 is like for me, it's fundamentally the most important step, because, like anything, like this beautiful building that I'm sitting in right now, it has a foundation, and the foundation has to be solid to be able to build the rest of this beautiful building, to fit the glass windows, and fit all the amenities inside. It has to have a solid foundation, and my recovery is built on a solid foundation. And my understanding of step 2 is that, power greater than myself is in every single thing, from, this beautiful person sitting in front of me, to the trees.
Yeah, lovely. Our question 8 is, which parts of the steps were the most difficult for you?
I don't think any of them were difficult, but I think some of them took a lot of courage. I had to dig really deep to find the beauty sometimes, When my father died, I spent 10 days travelling to Winchester to the hospice. I left early in the morning at Waterloo, got to Winchester, spent the whole day with him, And this guy, I said to myself for years, there will be a time when I can, ask him, why did he behave like that? Why did he do that to me? And I thought this was the time. And it took so much courage each day to go down there. And I never said anything to him. But we talked about, so many different things, from a bike accident I had when I was a kid, I was like, 10 years. Oh, no. I was about 12 years old. I was knocked down on my bike. And I said to my dad, do you remember that story when I was knocked down on my bike and we took that guy to court and we won? And he goes, my dad calls me Squeeze. He goes, oh yes, Squeeze, I remember. And he goes, who was that guy? And I said, I don't know, but what I didn't tell you, Daddy, was the fact that he had been drinking. He stunk of booze. And he goes, well, why didn't you tell me? And I said, I don't know. But really I wanted to say, because all my life I keep things to myself. We keep the secret, even things like that. But I didn't. And the 10 days, we built a relationship. I'm 61 years old, and in those 10 days. So yeah, it took like courage. I had to really dig deep. And, I took some photos of our hands together and I made some work around it. And, he's never seen any of my work, and I showed it to him on my phone. And I said, this piece of art I've made, look, it's our hands. He goes, oh, Squeeze, that's really quite lovely. And it's like all that stuff from all those years that kind of kept me in a really uncomfortable place. It just disappeared. And I think if it took courage and it took a whole heap of love. And what I find really interesting, because behind each step is the principle, the spiritual principle which we live by. And, the 8th step, which is writing the list, my dad was on that list, but it was kind of like over there, when I find the courage to do it. You see, that's the love list. You see, the principle behind the 8th step is love. And I had enough love to be able to put him at the top of the list. And when I'm going down to Winchester, he's the only person on that list. And then making the direct amends, the 9th step. And what is behind the 9th step is forgiveness. It's powerful. So it's never difficult. Difficult's not the right word. The 4th step is the one that we have to find the courage. That's the principle behind it. So it's always about courage, never about difficulties, And that's why the 2nd step, you have to find the power, because the power is by which you live by, So if I have power, I can do anything, even the toughest things where I had to dig so deep, I can do it.
Yeah. Power by which to live, absolutely. Question 9 is, which character defects give you most trouble?
Shame, guilt. Those are the tough ones.
Shame and guilt.
Yeah, shame and guilt. when we look at our shortcomings, you know, seven deadly sins to the addict, you know, 7 shortcomings. And out of the 7, pride, because pride I will hide behind and say I'm really good at this, but really I'm rubbish. But I won't let you know. I'll make you feel small so that I feel a bit better about myself, because I'm just full of fear and I'm a huge disappointment, okay? So pride is really big for me, and shame and guilt, because when I was pregnant, I drank, I smoked weed, I took heroin, you know. I feel pretty bad about that. And I feel pretty bad about it today, you know. The only way I can make restitution is to be the mother that I am meant to be, which is the spiritual being that works a program. You know, I have a framework, I practice principles. I am the mum that shows up. I do what I say. I have ears so I can listen, you know, have eyes and I can see. I give affirmations and validations, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't want it to look like I compensate. I don't compensate. It may look like it, but hey, I can do what I want because I'm free, okay? No one can touch me where my 3 boys are concerned, you know?
Do you look at this as a living amend in a way?
Of course. I mean, you know, it's often described like, you know, I'm living amends, but then you're not free. So, you know, I believe, you know, there's certain teachings in Tai Chi and Samurai. You know, I've been reading a lot of works around the Samurai beliefs and writings between the master and the container, and the art of freedom, okay, is to follow no path. It's about being, you know? And I want to be in that place where there are no real structures, and the art is just to be. Yeah.
Hope you don't mind me returning to the structure of the questions. There was question 10, which is, what is the best thing recovery has given you?
Yeah, to reach, I think, a feeling of real love and gratitude, you know?
Towards?
Everything. Everyone. Myself. I feel really connected to having a part in the world where I've always felt a bit on the perimeters of it and not really accepted. I've had to find different groups of people to feel validated, where now I feel more free and I feel confident in myself and who I am, what I'm about, what I can give, how I appreciate the world, society, how I have a place in it. Yeah.
Now, it's fascinating. Question 11 is, what would you say to a newcomer or someone wondering if they're an addict?
I would probably suggest to go to as many meetings as possible and really look within yourself. Because, you know, I don't really have a position to tell anybody anything about themselves, you know. And I think it's probably the last thing they want to hear, my opinion about them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, quite right.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to hear it at the time.
No.
But neither did you.
I would probably just say, get to different meetings, see if this is the place you want to be. You know, it's a program of abstinence, and some people come for different reasons. They may want to stop smoking crack, but they're okay to have a beer at weekends. You know, people come for all different kind of reasons to the fellowship. That's not any of my business. We are a diverse fellowship, anyone. The doors are open. Anyone can come, you know. I'm the type of addict where I have a full understanding that I have no power in around my using. Even when I really want to not use, I always end up using. I lose the power of choice. You know, that renders me powerless in around my emotions and my actions, my thoughts, my feelings, my decision making. Yeah. So when I came to the fellowship the first time, I knew this was my place. You know, I never looked back. I've done exactly what I've been told to do through a sponsor. You know, I did a 6-week book study. I went through the program, 12 steps, 12 traditions, 12 concepts. I understand the principles behind the steps. I practice those today. You know, I do work within hospitals and institutions.
Yeah, you do a lot of that, don't you?
I love that.
Yeah.
I've been doing that since I was 18 months.
Wow. What is so special? I mean, I know what, but I really want your take on it. What is so special about doing work in hospitals and institutions? Why is that service so amazing?
It's frontline.
Yes.
You know, it's frontline. I love that. That was where I was, you know. I love going into facilities, speaking to other women who talk about using when they were pregnant and they couldn't stop, you know, dealing with the consequences of that. I like going into prisons to addicts who are practicing a program within 4 walls, you know. I remember I spoke at a hospitals and institution meeting in Sen Prison, which is a women's prison, massive. And the meeting was taking place in the auditorium. It was huge. It was about 200 inmates all in that meeting. It was massive. I was so nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, I just don't know if I can cope with this. But I did it. And I remember this woman sharing back to me, and it just changed everything of what I thought of this statement, going to any lengths. Okay, now, in the rooms of recovery, you hear people say, my sponsor asked me, will I go to any lengths? And it's within the concept of getting to as many meetings, doing this, doing that, going to any lengths, okay? So this woman shared to me, going to any lengths is going to any lengths to change in myself. And she does that on her own, in a room, on a 24-hour lockup. She only comes out for food, maybe a meeting, maybe a little bit of recreation. The rest of the time she's locked up. Yeah. She's going to any lengths. And I was like, wow. It's an internal thing. I can go to any lengths sitting right here now with you, you know? I can go to any lengths in my bedroom talking to my son, or in the kitchen making dinner. I'm going to any lengths, you know?
So fascinating take. I was privileged to do a few shares around prisons as well. And I went to Belmarsh and did a chair there. I was nervous as hell, right? I mean, apart from the fact that I have 0 prison cred, and I thought, would they even just relate to me and to what I had to say? But the illness is the same, no matter where you are. If you're in there or outside, the illness is the same. And I can't tell you how much this one chair, but other chairs that I've done in other prisons as well, has changed my perspective on so many things. It's incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And sometimes it makes me a little bit angry, I suppose, when, you know, we are so blasé sometimes, kind of go, oh, I don't want to go to that meeting, or, we live, there are those people in there, men and women, who can't just go to a meeting. They rely on me and you and other people to show up to bring it to them, or there is no recovery there. And we are sometimes that's the nature of humans. I get that. Just so flippant about the amount of choice we have, right? Oh God, what is raining? I'm not going to go, or whatever it is, and speaking to the guys in there, and it was a great meeting, particularly the one in Belmarsh, and they were just so happy that someone would go there and speak to them, and it left me so deeply touched.
Yeah.
And really gave me a real reality check.
Yeah.
A real reality check. So I can only recommend doing it, and doing hospitals and institutions as services. It's the most brilliant service. People say it, then it is true. Absolutely. Yeah. Our last question 12. What do you want your higher power to say to you, quote unquote, at the pearly gates?
She's fabulous, darling. You're in. The show's gonna start. Yeah. It's funny because I've talked about this sort of thing with my sponsor right at the beginning, because I really had, the life and death thing. What does it all mean, and where do we all go, and what is it really like in the other place? A friend of mine passed away, and the service, the priest said, in heaven, there's a massive banquet table filled with every kind of foods. It's bountiful. And I said to my sponsor, do you believe that there's this massive banquet? And he said, I don't know, Lisa, but I believe that this is God's garden. And I don't know about you, but I want to be a part of it. And I thought it was a really beautiful way of looking at, the deeper side of the spiritual life and the human experience, or the human experience and the spiritual afterlife. It's difficult to know, but, my friend Michael passed away just before I came into recovery. It was the year before I came in, and I was really hitting a very dark place. And it's funny how the body tries to deal with grief and the death of someone really close. And he came to visit me on 2 occasions. The first one was I was walking across the park, and Michael just suddenly appeared. He was like dancing around me, and I said out loud, "You got to stop that, Michael. Everyone's going to start looking at us." And I caught myself, and then he was gone. It was just a moment. And literally the following week, his ashes arrived to my place, because when he passed, it was his wishes that his ashes come to me, half to stay with me and the boys, and the other half to go back to Paris where we first met, which I obviously honoured. So I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh, so that's what you're telling me, that you're on your way. That's incredible. And when the ashes came and I opened up the urn, I was making a huge joint, and I put grass into the urn, and I said, "Oh, Michael, it's a long time since you last smoked. Let's smoke together." And he just appeared, and he goes, "Let's go in the garden and smoke." So I went out in the garden, and he was just like standing in front of me. He just looked amazing. He was in a white T-shirt. He always wore a white sleeveless T-shirt. He's Afro-American, super, super tall, looks like a basketball player, but he is a total queen. He is crazy and all in your face. He's fabulous, with his bleached moustache, and just a fabulous guy. And he was standing in his white T-shirt and his dark blue jeans, and he looked incredible. I was like, wow, Michael, you look amazing. He goes, Lisa, it's incredible here. I'm not ill. I don't have to eat. I don't have to wash. I'm just here. He goes, it's amazing. And that was the last time I saw him. And I had a scan on my head. I got a tumour just above my eye. It's growing on the inside of my skull. And I had a lot of investigations around that recently. And I said to the boys, listen, whatever comes out of this, I'm okay. I'm going to be okay because I know who's waiting for me. And trust me, it's going to be a party when I arrive, okay?
Wonderful words. Thank you so much, Lisa. You were absolutely fabulous. I'd like to thank you for your courage and your honesty. It's been very touching and very powerful. Thank you for being my guest on 12 Steps and 12 Questions today.
Thank you so much.
We're still rolling.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
We're just chatting.
Okay.
Wow.
Have you had experiences like that around when, because I sometimes think to myself, the body's incredible. We get through really difficult times by, especially around the death of someone you really, really love. You start to see them and it's all part of the process. Or is it real? Do we really see them?
Well, that's a good question, to which I obviously have no answer. And, I'm a bit of a scaredy cat when it comes to these things. So I think I tend to shut it off. But there was one moment, unforgotten. I was at my mum's house and I was, my dad, who passed in 2011, he has this toolbox, okay? And so I was at my mum's house, sort of doing errands around the house. My mum's in care now. She's in a wheelchair now. She's disabled. She wasn't always disabled, but she's disabled now in her old age. And so anyway, so I was doing errands around the house, sort of just basic DIY kind of stuff. So I'm opening my dad's, I haven't thought of this in a while. I opened my dad's toolbox and I'm looking for stuff in there. And all of a sudden, I am getting this incredibly overpowering sense of basil. Now, my father, it's literally like, and I have no basil anywhere around me, right? And I'm opening this toolbox and it's as if I open a toolbox full of basil. Okay, it was just so strong. Basil's got such a pungent, wonderful, almost grassy kind of smell.
Oh.
And my father, he always used to be so in love with basil and with other different sort of cooking herbs and whatnot. And that is the only time, I don't know whether it was a visit or just such a strong memory or something like that, where I'd have an association like that, which was just ever so strong, like a visit. It's only recently, actually, that I've started to think so differently about my father after a graveside amend, actually. And that I find that he's much more close. We're talking the last maybe 2 months or so, that he's much more closer to me and that I can feel him around me. This is entirely new to me and I didn't really foresee this and I'm not even sure if it has anything to do with recovery per se. But where my spiritual life has gone on to a different level, that I would have connections with other people that I know here no longer. And having said that, it is connected to recovery, obviously, because this only happened after my amend to my father, graveside amend, which I only did a few months ago.
Yeah, amazing. It unlocks something, when we let go and something deeper happens that you can't control or explain, but it's there.
Yeah.
It's a powerful thing.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah, and smell as well, the basil, that is quite beautiful.
Yeah, especially, as if my father was a very earthbound sort of a person. He was very much, didn't have a lot of education and stuff. So, and he was very much, he would always sort of, when he drew comparisons with things, he would always use animals or plants or whatever. He just much more nature, much more related to nature than I ever was, so it was no surprise in that respect,
That's nice.
Yeah. On that note, thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
We've come to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed it and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe. While this pod is based on the 12-step recovery program, it's not officially affiliated with any 12-step fellowship. 12 Steps and 12 Questions is not substance or behavior specific, it's fully self-supporting and not for profit. And you know this next bit. It's not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, and it neither endorses nor opposes any causes.